Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May Brahman protect us all. May Brahman nourish us all. May we attain great spiritual heights by the grace of Brahman. May our study be luminous. May there be no disharmony amongst us. Om, peace, peace, peace. I'll chant the first verse of the Drigdrishya Viveka with which we started last time, and you can follow after me. I'll chant first and then you follow. Rupam drishyam lochanam drik, Rupam drishyam lochanam drik, Tadrishyam driktu manasam, Tadrishyam driktu manasam, Drishyadhivrittaya sakshi, Drishyadhivrittaya sakshi, Drigeva natu drishyate, Drigeva natu drishyate. As we saw last time, this is a most profound verse. It gives us a technique of realizing our true self. You see, in every experience, we have the subject and the object, the one who is experiencing and that which is experienced. The one who experiences is the subject, the knower, or in the language of this, the seer. And that which is experienced is the object, the known, or the seen. Now, it is a matter of common experience that the seer and the seen are different. In every experience, we are aware of ourselves as the knower, as the seer, and what we know or what we see as the object, as the seen. So the seer and the seen, the knower and the known, the drashta and the drishya, in the terms of this verse, they are always different. And using this principle, last time we observed the text guides us through this process, just like a very good teacher, taking us from the most commonsensical experience, from our what we know, from there to deeper and deeper levels of analysis. So we start with something very common. We are looking out at the world, simply looking out with our eyes. So the world full of color and shape, that is the seen, and the eyes are the seer. In a very common sense, naive way, just look at it, the way we experience the world. And since the seer and the seen are different, it's quite obvious the eyes are different from what they see. And you go next, deeper, the eyes themselves are objects of experience. That my eyes are open, or they're closed, or they're itching, or I need spectacles, or I can see very well. All these aspects of the eyes are known by the mind. So the mind becomes the knower, and the eyes become the known. The mind becomes the seer, drashta, and the eyes become the seen, drishyam. And the two are different, as we saw last time. It's quite obviously they are different. As we go deeper, further, we find the mind itself is also known. After all, we are aware. I am happy. I like this, or I don't like it. And we are aware of this. This is the thoughts in them, our minds, our feelings, our emotions, our memories, ideas, comprehension, lack of comprehension. All these we are aware of as they come and go. Therefore, the contents of our minds are also something that we know. So they are also in the category of the known, the seen, the object. And there is something which illumines the mind from within. So that becomes the ultimate seer, knower. And since we are always the seer, we are never the seen. In all our experience, we always see it as we are the experiencer. and the rest is the experienced. What we experience is the experienced object. So in this case also, if there is something which knows the mind, then we are that. We are that which knows the mind. We are that which shines upon the mind. We are that which illumines the contents of the mind. And the mind is known as an object. Through the mind we know the rest of the body and our sense organs. That is also known, seen. Through the mind and the sense organs we experience the world. And the world is also something that is seen, observed, known. What do we know at the end of this analysis? We know that we are not the body, we are not the sense organs, we are not the mind even the contents of the mind. And this is enormous in itself. It's a huge revelation to us, because what we think of ourselves as usually, before we reflect, before we take a critical view of our experience, before that, in a pre-critical stage, we regard ourselves as a body-mind complex. I am an individual, and this is who I am. This body and the mind within it, this is who I am. The boundary of the body, the skin, this is my boundary. Beyond this is not me. Up to this is me. That's how we think of ourselves. But this analysis, it claims to show us that we are not even this body. We are the experiencer of this body. We are not even the mind within. We are the experiencer of the mind. So we, the experiencer, the knower, we are the witness of the mind and the body. This is what we saw last time. And now we'll go further ahead. We'll go into the next few verses. Some of you were thinking last time, if it took 1 hour to explain one verse, we are not going to make much progress. But don't worry, it's not going to be like that. Some of the verses we can move much faster. For example, now we are going to do the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th verses. And we are going to do them one after another, because what these verses do, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, is just explain the first verse. What we saw last time, that is explained in detail by these 4 verses. These Sanskrit verses, shlokas, they have 4 quarters, 4 parts. 1st quarter, 2nd quarter, 3rd quarter, and 4th quarter. And this verse which we did also has 4 quarters. The 1st quarter is, forms are the seen and the eyes are the seer. That's the quarter 1. And verse number 2 explains this quarter. The 2nd quarter is, the eyes are the seen and the mind is the seer. And the 2nd quarter is explained by the 3rd verse. And similarly, the 3rd quarter, the mind itself is seen and there is a witness to the mind. That is explained by the 4th verse. And the 5th verse explains the 4th quarter, that the seer of the mind, the witness itself, never becomes an object of knowledge, never is experienced. It is always the experiencer. So now we shall go into the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th verses, one after another. I shall read out the Sanskrit as always, and so you repeat after I have read it out. Verse number 2. Those of you who have got the book, you can follow me. Nilapita sthula sukshma, Nilapita sthula sukshma, Rasva dirghadi bhedata, Rasva dirghadi bhedata, Nana vidhani rupani, Nana vidhani rupani, Pashyed lochanam ekadha, Pashyed lochanam ekadha. So the 1st quarter of the 1st verse. Eyes are the seer and the world of forms and shapes, colors, that is the seen. That is explained in detail here. And what is said here? Something very simple. Colors, black or blue and yellow. Shapes, forms in the world outside. Some are gross forms, some are very subtle forms. All of them are seen by the eye. Some are long, and some are tall, some are short, and so all these different kinds of forms are seen by the same pair of eyes, by the same organ of vision. You may recall, we learned three things last time. First, the seer and the seen are different, number one. Number two, the seer is one and the seen are many. So here you have many colors and many forms, but they are seen by the same eye. I don't mean one eye, but the same organ of vision. And the third thing we learned was the seen are relatively changing compared to the seer. So the forms which we see, the colors and the people, things around us, keeps changing throughout. Relatively speaking, our eyes which see them, they do not change much. Now if you look at the verse, it's very simple. Neela and Pita means blue and yellow. Sthula and Sukshma means gross and subtle. Rasva means short. Dirgha means long. Adi means etc. Bhedata, these differences. Nana vidhani rupani, the variety of forms. Incidentally, the word rupa in Sanskrit, it means form in general, but particularly, specifically, it means color. So, the thing which we first see when we open our eyes, we say we see people and chairs and tables. Actually, we see colors. We see colors and we can make out shapes. So, all these varieties, nana vidhani rupani, varieties of colors and shapes and forms, pashet, sees, the eyes by themselves, ekadha. This is an explanation of the first quarter, meaning thereby the seer, the eyes are different from the forms which they see. Now we go to the third verse. Remember, it explains the second quarter, that the eyes themselves become an object of knowledge and the mind is the seer. So let's go to the third verse. Andhyamandya patutveshu, andhyamandya patutveshu, netra dharmeshu chaikadha, netra dharmeshu chaikadha. Sankalpayet mana shrotra, sankalpayet mana shrotra, tvagado yojyatamidam, tvagado yojyatamidam. What does this verse say? Different characteristics of my eyes. Sometimes the eyes may be blind, some persons cannot see, or sometimes I feel that I cannot see well, I need contacts or spectacles, or sometimes I feel I can see well. These different characteristics of the eyes, of my eyes, are known by me. And what knows them? The mind. There's no very deep philosophy here. It's simply recounting our experiences and inviting us to reflect on our experiences. Everybody experiences this. So I know the conditions of my eyes. Eyes are open, eyes are closed, I can see well, I cannot see well, and so on. Who knows this? The mind. If the mind is the knower, then all of these have become the known, the eyes become the known, and the mind is different from the eyes. The knower and the known are different. They cannot be the same. And quite obviously we see, it's a fact that our minds are different from the eyes. Sankalpayet mana, I'll read out the Sanskrit. Andhya means blindness. Mandya means dullness of the eyes, the inability of the eyes to see well. Patu, sharpness of vision. 20 by 20 they say, doctors. And netra dharma, the qualities of the mind, the characteristics of the eyes. Netra means eyes, characteristics of the eyes. Ekadha, by itself, the mind. Sankalpayet manaha, the mind can cognize, can understand, can think about. Now what do? It's the same thing, not only for the eyes, also for all our sense organs. Why only the eyes? Ears. What the condition of my ears? I can know, I can hear well, or I need, I think I can hear well, but everybody tells me you cannot hear well, so you need hearing aid. So the conditions of the ears are well known to the mind. The mind understands it, so the mind is different from the ears. And so for the skin, the nose, and so on, the tongue, and so on. So shrotra means ears, twag means skin. Ears, skin, nose, tongue, all the sense organs. Yodyatam idam. You can fit it here. The same goes for all the other sense organs. The mind by itself understands, cognizes, knows, sees the sense organs. So the mind is different from the sense organs, and by that reasoning, the mind is something which knows the body from within. And so the mind is the knower, sense organs and the physical body are the known. So the mind must be different from them, because the seer and the seen are different. This is the fundamental distinction that we are holding on to from the very beginning. And that the mind is different from the sense, from the body and the sense organs, it is not difficult to understand. That's how we feel also. The mind is something subtle, the body is something gross, and we feel this. Though scientists and doctors will tell you that the mind is something generated by the brain, but that's a different matter altogether. How the mind is generated by the brain, and we are entering vague territory there. But here, as we feel it, we feel that the mind is something and the body is something else. So the mind becomes the seer, the body is the seen. Quick examination. What about the world outside? Is it the seer or the seen now? Seen. The world is always the seen. The known. World is always known. But the body and mind, sometimes we feel that it is the knower with respect to the world outside. But when we look at the body and mind, it becomes the known and the mind becomes the knower. Now we go to the fourth verse. This fourth verse is about the third quarter of the first verse. The third quarter says, the contents of our minds are known. They are objects of knowledge. The contents of our minds are as much objects as this book is an object, different from me. And this fourth verse goes, I'll read out, then you can follow. Kama sankalpa sandeho Shraddha shraddhe dhriti tare Rir dhir bhir ityevam adin bhasayatte kadhachitihi. It's a beautiful verse. Chitihi means consciousness. Consciousness illumines by itself. What does it illumine? What does consciousness shine upon? It shines upon the contents of our minds. And what are the contents of our minds? Kama, desire. I want this, I want that. Desire. I want something. We are aware that we want something. Now here I'll make a subtle distinction. The distinction is this. When we say that we are aware when we want something, when we say we are aware of our thoughts, what they mean here is not that you are thinking about your thoughts. That's called introspection. Even when I don't think about it, when I want something, I'm also immediately aware that there is a thought, a desire in my mind, even without reflecting back upon it. So consciousness directly illumines our thoughts, our emotions, our desires, our memories, our understanding or lack of understanding. All of that is directly illumined by consciousness. You may remember I had told you that there are 3 stages of understanding this. The first stage is we should be able to repeat back what the verse says. The second stage is we should intellectually understand what they are trying to tell us. We get it. And the third stage is it must become a living fact for us. Just as I say that there is a book on the table, you don't have to believe it. You don't have to intellectualize about it. It's a fact, you can see it. In the same way, it should become a clear fact for us that the contents of my mind are objects. And consciousness illumines these objects. Kama, desire, arises in the mind. Immediately, I'm aware of that. Sankalpa, thoughts, various types of thoughts. Sandeha, doubt. So he is so intelligently putting this. Suppose you don't understand. I don't understand what this guy is talking about. I do not understand. This confusion, am I not aware of the confusion in the mind also? Yeah, that's what he's saying. The confusion in the mind also is illuminated. Suppose someone doubts the whole thing, is skeptical about this whole thing. Is skeptical about this whole thing. All that Advaita tells this person is, if you're skeptical about the whole thing, are you aware that you are skeptical? Yeah, I'm aware that I'm skeptical. That's all we are saying. Shankaracharya says, Yaeva asya nirakarta tasyeva atmasa. The one who denies the existence of this Vedantic self, that self, it's his very self, of the self, the one who is denying the existence of this self. So, that this consciousness does not exist, it's as ridiculous as saying, if I speak and I say I don't have a tongue. I don't have a tongue. If I don't have a tongue, how am I speaking? So anything which we are aware of, that shows that consciousness is illumining that thought in the mind. Sandeha, doubt. Shraddha, a deep faith. Yes, I believe in God, I believe in religion. I'm convinced about Vedanta. Your conviction also shines in the light of the same Atman. I am not convinced. Ashraddha. I don't have faith in this. I am not convinced. That lack of conviction, that also shines in the same light of the same Atman. Ashraddha. Dhriti. The ability to hold on to something. It's a great quality. In the 13th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, among the qualities which lead to self-realization, one of the things is dhriti, the ability to hold on to a high pursuit in spite of difficulties. In fact, that's a quality which leads to success in any endeavor in life. Dhriti. It's a quality that you display when you come today, when it's raining outside and it's inclement weather, and you brave the weather and you come to a Vedanta class in the evening. So you're displaying dhriti. That's the manifestation of the ability to hold on to a higher pursuit. Dhriti. Itare, etc. All sorts of thoughts, feelings, emotions, memories, whatever comes up in the mind is illumined by one witness consciousness. Chitihi, consciousness. Sakshi, witness. What else? Ri, modesty. Dhi, understanding, intellect. Bhi, fear. These are just examples. Iti eva madin, and such. All sorts of thoughts, feelings, emotions, everything which comes up in the mind, bhasayati, illumines. Illumines. Ekadhachiti. Consciousness by itself illumines all of this. So this is the third quarter, where we first come across a mention of this consciousness. Then, the fifth verse. The fifth verse is a very beautiful verse. It talks about our real self, the true self, what we really are according to Advaita Vedanta, and in a very poetic way. Please follow after me. Nodeti nastametyesha, nodeti nastametyesha, na vriddhim yati nakshayam, na vriddhim yati nakshayam, swayam vibhatyathaanyani, swayam vibhatyathaanyani, bhasayet sadhanam vinam. This consciousness within, ever shining, know that its comparison is with the sun. It does not rise. Every day we experience sunrise and sunset. The sun of consciousness never rises, never sets. Eternally shining. No deti nastameti. Neither it rises, neither does it set. Always shining. There is a similar verse in the Panchadashi where it says, days pass, months pass, consciousness shines. Years pass, the body grows old, dies, consciousness watches, shines. The ages roll past, thousands of years, life after life comes and goes. Consciousness, unchanging, watches. So it neither rises nor sets. The Panchadashi goes further. He says yugas, millions of years, the cycle of creation, the universe itself, from Big Bang to what do they call it? Big Crunch. Yes, the universe dies a heat death. Consciousness is still watching. So that consciousness is not something that we talk about when we are talking about psychology or physiology, the brain producing consciousness. Not that. That's as far as the biologists or physiologists, the scientists have gone. But this consciousness is fundamental. This is before matter. It only functions through the mind and the brain. So, neither does it rise, nor does it set, no deti nastameti. Neither does it increase nor decrease. Swami, sometimes I'm more conscious, sometimes less conscious. I have to struggle to remain conscious during Vedanta class, for example. Yeah, we do lose consciousness in sleep. So are we not unconscious in sleep? This whole idea of your consciousness always shining. I remember right here in this hall last year, I gave a talk from Panchadashi, and there was this young girl who had come from Canada with her parents. And she asked this question before the class. This whole idea of yours having one unchanging consciousness. Well, in deep sleep, when we fall asleep, there's no consciousness. So, doesn't it break down there? Let alone ages passing and death and many thousands of years passing and consciousness shining. None of that. Every day we fall asleep and we are unconscious, consciousness is switched off. Where is consciousness? Well, that's where Indian philosophy ventures to disagree. We shall see all that later. Why do we feel that sometimes we are more conscious, sometimes we are less conscious, sometimes we are unconscious? Why do we feel that? All those things will be taken up and explained in detail afterwards, in a few verses hence. But it will just suffice to say that in deep sleep also this consciousness is there. The difference between deep sleep and this state is, here consciousness has some object to be aware of. In deep sleep there is nothing to be aware of. There is no world for us. Remember, this is a subjective approach. So we are talking about your experience or my experience. Don't say that in deep sleep, Swami, what do you mean? That there is no world, there is no body, there is no mind. We can see the fellow sleeping and snoring. So how come there is no body? We are taking an objective look from outside. But what is that person's experience? What is your experience in deep sleep? What is my experience? My experience is that I have no experience of the world. I have no experience of the body, the sense organs. I have no experience of the mind, thoughts, feelings, emotions. I have no experience of myself as reflecting upon my own existence. And yet, they say consciousness is there. There is nothing for it to be aware of. It's just consciousness. I remember there was a debate between philosophers and scientists in the Institute of Culture in Gold Park several years ago in Calcutta. And they came to this point. They couldn't agree upon the definition of consciousness. So finally somebody asked the neuroscientist, Doctor, in neuroscience, in deep sleep, is there consciousness or not? From your scientific point of view. And the scientist stood up and said, the way we define consciousness, there is no consciousness in deep sleep. There is no consciousness in deep sleep. And the philosopher, a Sankhyan philosopher who is also an American, Professor Larson, he stood up and said, well, from the Indian philosophy point of view, Vedanta or Sankhya point of view, in deep sleep there is only consciousness. See, this is the difference. In deep sleep there is no consciousness, and deep sleep there is only consciousness. Consciousness without having any object to be aware of. So consciousness is still there in deep sleep. Mystics were aware of this. I was reading a Christian mystic, such a beautiful experience, the beautiful language. He says, just like in deep space, the blackness of space, in deep space, we think it's black, dark. It's actually full of light near the sun. It's full of light. There is nothing to reflect the light. So it appears to be completely dark. Similarly, in a deep sleep, consciousness is there, but there's nothing to reflect consciousness, nothing for consciousness to be aware of. What happens in deep sleep? Swayam vibhati. It shines by itself. And in the waking state, in the dream state, that consciousness illumines other things. Atha anyani. It illumines everything else. Just imagine, to be aware of anything, we need an instrument. To know that people are there in the room, you need eyes. How did you know all these people were there in the room? I saw them. How did you know that the Swami was speaking? I heard him. So we know with the help of instruments of knowledge. So you know that all others were in the room because you saw them. How do you know that you were in the room? Don't say, I saw myself. You don't have to wait to see yourself. Even before you know anything, you're already aware of your own existence. So consciousness is self-illumined. It does not depend on any instrument of knowledge to express itself or to shine forth. To know other things, it requires instruments. Mind is required to know thoughts, feelings, emotions. Mind and sense organs are required to know the body and the external world. So the same consciousness, the seer, the knower, the ultimate subject, the witness, uses the mind and the sense organs to know the body and to know the external world. But itself, he says, Swayam Vibhati, it's called Swaprakasha, self-luminous. Consciousness is ever shining and it's self-luminous. It does not require a second entity to know itself. Bhasayet sadhanam vina. It illumines without any instrument. To know the mic or the table, I require the instrument of the eyes. But to know the contents of my own mind, consciousness does not require any instrument. It illumines directly. So this is what the explanation of the fourth quarter, the last quarter, the one which is our real nature, pure consciousness. Now, I will not go any further with the text now, because a new area will be started, a new topic will be started next. But what I'll do is, because this is not just a Drigdrishya Viveka class, this is an introduction to Vedanta. So we'll take a little break here and talk about some general matters. I started straight with the text last time, because as I said, I wanted us all to have a taste of Vedanta itself straight away, without any preliminary introduction. So now some preliminary talk. Some preliminary matters have to be discussed. The source book, the source texts of the Vedanta are the Upanishads. In fact, the definition of Vedanta, the traditional definition of Vedanta is Vedanta nama Upanishad pramanam. What is Vedanta? If you ask a classical Sanskrit scholar, what is Vedanta? He will say, Vedanta is the source of knowledge known as the Upanishads. Vedanta means Upanishads, the texts called Upanishads. What are these Upanishads? They are part of the fundamental spiritual texts, religious texts, the scriptures of the Hindus, the Vedas. The four Vedas, Rig Veda, Sama Veda, Yajur Veda, Atharva Veda, these are the fundamental, the core spiritual, the scriptural texts of the Hindus. And these Vedas are vast, there's a vast corpus of literature. Most of them deal with rites, rituals. Many of us, we have seen in the Vedanta societies the fire sacrifice which is performed, the home of fire. So that traces its origins back to the rituals of the Vedas. Now, towards the end of the Vedas, sometimes in the middle of the Vedas, you find these texts which set forth the highest philosophical wisdom.